This event was dubbed Ask a Cop. Is this part of the Ask a Cop series?
Conversations with a Cop.
Conversations
Yes.
with a Cop. So I'm not a cop, but I represent the 911 Center. I'm an operations manager in the CSCC, which we had branched away from the Seattle Police Department and became our own independent unit or organization with the city in 2021 actually, last June we broke free. We're now called the Community Safety and Communication Center, but we operate exactly the same as we always have. We are the 911 center for the entire city of Seattle, and we dispatch police and other resources as the city comes up with them. This is just going to kind of be a brief overview of the 911 system and our center as a whole. And afterwards, any questions you guys have, don't hesitate to ask. So again, we are the Community Safety and Communication Center. Each year, just as a heads up for you, we're the largest 911 center in the entire Pacific Northwest. And all we take is police calls, or traditionally that's all we've taken. In 2021, we took 744,000 calls for service. That's about 208,000 calls that were dispatched, and we also take text to 911. So if any of you has a cell phone, we do take 911 texts. But we do have a slogan that you will text, you call if you can, but you text if you can't. So text is usually reserved for people who are hearing impaired or are not in a safe place to make a voice phone call. Our 911 center receives about 2,000 calls per day. So we're very, very busy. In comparison, there's some 911 centers across the water on the east side of Bellevue. They take about a third of the calls that we take, and in the Auburn Valley, they take about a third of the calls we take. There's no center in this entire area that's busier than us. So when you call 911, how do you reach us? Well, through 911, right? But we also have a couple of other numbers that we have. The non-emergency number, which is primarily for the Seattle Police Department right now, is the 206-625-5011. We also have a 10-digit number for people that are calling outside of the city. So that's a pretty important one. Like, have you ever heard of somebody says they're back east and their family member might be in trouble and they're trying to get a hold of the local dispatch center in another city? Well, this one's ours for other places, 206-583-2111. So those are the three ways to reach our center. As far as our staffing, we have 3 primary shifts. Day shift is 7 to 3 p.m. or 1500 in military time. Swing shift is 3 p.m. to 11. And then graveyard shift is 11 p.m. to 0700. As you can see, our staffs only have about 18 to 22 people on day shift, 20 to 24 people on swing shift, and overnight it could be as few as 12 people. And on busier days like Fridays and Saturday nights, we have about 15 people. As far as how the 911 center is composed, we have the person who runs the 911 center is known as the director. Traditionally it had been a captain in the Seattle Police Department, but once we became the CSCC, they formed a civilian director. Right now it's an interim director, Christopher Lombard, who's a fire chief with the Seattle Fire Department. We have a deputy director who's Christy Fisher. She's a longtime 911 expert. She actually helped form ValleyCom, which is the 911 center in the Auburn Valley, and she helped put together NORCOM, which is the east side 911 center. So she's really, really skilled and a great addition to our team. We do have managers. We have 3 operations managers. I'm one of them. We have 2 others, Kyla Gibson and Rob Montague. We kind of separate our duties based on shifts so that we can monitor all of our supervisors and shifts better to give us more span of control. We also have a training manager, Kristen Henshaw, and currently we have a vacancy. It's an operational manager that kind of handles the facilities aspect, our technology, our equipment, and stuff of that nature. So we have about 5 total managers. We do have analysts. So inside of our center, we have a bunch of specialists who will look at our statistics, they'll look at our equipment and the different trends and what's going on to make sure the city of Seattle has the best, most current technology. As an example, we actually lead the way in interoperability with the other police agencies and also with the phone equipment to make sure that we have all of the up-to-date equipment and technology for if you needed to call 911 and that the systems would work. Our systems rarely ever fail, and usually, does anybody remember a couple of months ago getting some kind of an alert on your phone saying that 911 was down? No. So that was something that was the entire state experienced, and everybody got like a really annoying I want to say an annoying text to your phones or a call to your landline saying 911 was down, call these other numbers if you're having an emergency. It was probably about 7 or 8 o'clock at night back in, I want to say, middle of December. But that wasn't because of our center, that was a vendor issue. So that wasn't the city of Seattle was not working, it was something far beyond our control. Beyond the analysts, we have supervisors. So we have about 18 supervisors that work the floor, and they are direct supervisors for the dispatchers and call takers. Dispatcher 3s are acting supervisors, and they could fill in for a supervisor when we're short-staffed. Dispatcher 2s are primarily radio dispatchers, and dispatcher 1s are call takers. So as I previously stated, the operations managers oversee the floor. We also have our training manager who oversees our training unit. She is the hiring manager and quality assurance. The administrative manager handles our equipment and support personnel. The floor supervisors, they can work in a variety of positions. We have the administrative supervisor who will do the scheduling and payroll. They also take complaints from citizens if there's problems with the 911 personnel. We also have our radio supervisor. The radio supervisor listens to all of the main radio zones in the city. They are usually listening to 5 radio dispatchers, and they make notifications to command and also send out alerts that sometimes reach the public. We have a call taker supervisor who's a direct supervisor for our call takers. They offer them support and quality assurance and live listening reports every day to make sure that we're doing a good job. We do have dispatcher 3s who, again, they could be an acting supervisor. Currently, the only role that they could fill is the radio supervisor. Our dispatcher 2s, they are the ones who dispatch the police, so they don't actually take phone calls. They only dispatch calls for service when they're working at a radio zone. They keep track of the officers and other specialty units on their air, and they update calls with pertinent information. The people that you would most likely talk to are usually dispatcher 1s. They are the entry-level call takers, and they answer 911 calls and the non-emergency lines. So when it comes to our training, we have emergency and non-emergency call taking. There's 4 weeks of classroom. We treat it like a real class where they have to learn a huge book of information, but also how to process a 911 call and how to ask the who, what, when, why, where, and how, and all the other pertinent severity factors. There's 6 weeks of on-the-job training that happens where our new call takers are learning emergency and non-emergency call taking on-the-job training. After that, they get a live evaluation, and then they're released on their own. For most of our people these days, we try to cross-train them too, because there's a huge shortfall of 911 employees all across the area. You probably heard it on the radio, but Puget Sound Jobs, I think, has an advertisement on the radio right now about how we need 911 dispatchers very badly. So what we'll try to do once we get them trained on phones is radio train them as well. So after a couple of months on their own, we'll give them 2 weeks of classroom training and then a final exam, and then they'll train 10 weeks on the job with a trainer on the radio zones. At the end, they have a live evaluation just like for phones, and then if they pass, they're a radio dispatcher. This is a picture of our classroom. It's a small classroom, but we have about 8 positions where we can train people, and that's a dedicated classroom. This year alone, if you didn't know, our staffing was really, really bad the last 2 years. The pandemic and then the protests of 2020 really gave us a pretty big dent in our overall staffing. We were down as much as 35% of our floor staffing. And so this year alone, we've already hired about 40 people, and we're continuing to just chug away because we're trying to make sure that we have enough people to answer the phone to provide service to fine folks like you and everyone else in this community. So calling into 911. Anybody ever call 911? Just me? All right, Al. All right, so how it works. You call 911 and you're getting us. We are the 911 Center for Seattle. Now, usually when you call, what's happening behind the scenes is a series of things that we're doing to triage the event quickly. So what can happen is you might be on the freeway. If you're on I-5 and you're reporting some guy speeding down the freeway, acting crazy, we'll transfer you to the State Patrol because they handle their own issues on freeways. If it's a medical or a fire situation, we'll transfer you to the Seattle Fire Department. Currently, the Seattle Fire Department has their own 911 answering system. They're a PSAP underneath us, and we transfer all calls for service to them. And you will speak to an actual firefighter in their dispatch center. If it's not fire or state patrol, then it'll be another police agency in the Puget Sound, or it'll be us. So there's the different ways that you could call us, and these are kind of the different outcomes of what could happen. If you have an emergency, it'll go to dispatch. Dispatch will send the officers. That's currently the only resources that we have in the city of Seattle right now for anything that's not medical or fire. The city council and the mayor and their office are working on other resources. I know we have CSOs in the house. And that's an ongoing work. Of course, there's a whole lot of checks and balances that go into it. It's not as easy as it sounds to just say we're going to create some new unit to go to these calls. We have to make sure everyone's safety is thought of first and foremost. There are other things that could happen though. So if you call emergency or non-emergency, sometimes you could get a referral. The city handles things in a variety of ways. They even try to take advantage of some of the technology that we have these days. There's different phone apps and city services that they'll route you to. Have you ever seen like a RV parked around Green Lake that looked like somebody might be living in it? Maybe. Well, there's different ways that we handle that these days. We don't just blindly send cops to go move them along. The city wants to try and offer them resources, and there's different programs out there that we might say to you, hey, there's this link that we're going to send you, or there's a number that you need to call to report it. Other options are phone reports. We have officers that do certain low-level crimes over the phone, and those same type of reports are offered online. The city of Seattle is currently trying to expand all of the things that they offer online or over the phone. In the last 5 years, that has changed vastly. We don't offer nearly what we offer now. We didn't used to offer that, not nearly as much. So if you've ever had to call 911, maybe you had a great experience, maybe you were frustrated. Let me explain. So when you call 911, the call taker is expected to ask a series of questions. The reason why is because they're trying to make sure everybody's safety is taken into consideration. Your safety, the officer's safety, or whoever's responding. So when you do call 911, don't get frustrated if the call taker tries to take control of the call. You actually want to let them kind of lead the way. Answer their questions, and don't think that their questions are going to delay the response. They truly don't. We can type in a call for dispatch, and dispatch can start sending calls, and they're expected to try and ask as many questions that are pertinent to your situation that could pose a risk to anybody involved. So there's going to be a lot of questions they ask that may not make sense to you on the surface, but they're doing it because they're trying to look out for everyone's safety. That's the #1 goal of any call taker who takes a call from the public. Also, they're going to be asking for facts. So say if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I don't know is totally an acceptable answer versus trying to guess or assume. All we want to know is exactly what you're seeing or hearing. You don't have to necessarily assume or give us leading statements. So, the most important thing when you call 911 is where are you? What's the address? What's the intersection? You want to know where you are, whether it's the address or cross streets or a name of a business. If you don't know where you are, we do have a way to map you. But don't get me wrong, this isn't CSI. We can't triangulate the coordinates, not yet anyways. So sometimes we're going to need your help in making sure we understand where you're at. As an example, how many floors does this building have? 10? So say you called here and you didn't know where you were in the building, we would have no idea what floor you're on, right? So we might say, hey, what floor are you on? And that would really help us in finding you if we needed to. That's just one example of several when people call 911. The other thing that we want to know is what happened. And we want a brief description of what happened. We don't necessarily need the whole story, but we just need to know the brunt information, what is going on, what crime was committed. Then what we will ask is the time delay. Because on 911, we're trying to treat it as an imminent threat to life. If it happened last Thursday or a month ago, we might need to get you off the 911 line because other people might be calling. But when it's in progress, that's going to up the ante and up the priority of the call. Weapons. We always ask weapons. Any situation that's involving other people, we're always going to ask the question, did you see any weapons? Did anybody say they had any weapons? It's a paramount officer safety question that we ask, and it's really a public safety issue too. We always want to know if somebody's armed with weapons. We also ask why. Sometimes there will be reasons. Say you ever get somebody having road rage and they go, hey man, some guy tried to run me off the road. And then they go, okay, well what was going on? I say, well I honked at him and flipped him off for cutting me off. It's like, okay, well, we have a little road rage going on, right? What led up to the crime? From there, we always will ask, who is the other people involved? Are they suspects? Are they victims? What's their description? We try to get as many descriptions of involved people as possible, because as an example, when you're down at 3rd and Pike by Westlake Mall, you could disappear into a crowd, and if we don't know what you're looking like, we don't know who we're looking for, right? So we always try to get descriptions of everybody involved so we can make sure we locate them, or you if you're the one calling. Your description if you're waiting for officers. So when we get descriptions, we have a set format that we use every single time. And so again, if you're ever calling, this is going to be the protocol on how we ask. We always go from top to bottom and outside to inside. When we go with people, we're going to ask for race, gender, build, age. We're going to try and get all that because that gives the officers and the responders a better idea of who they're looking for. The clothing is going to be a big deal. For vehicles, they always ask color, year, make, model, body, any kind of accessories like spoilers or something, tinted windows, and then the license plates. Typically, when you give a license plate, don't be thrown off if they just confirm with you that it's a Washington plate. Now, we know what a Washington plate should be, but sometimes you have an older plate that might be a different format or a personalized plate. So we always confirm that as much as possible. So the call taker is the one who's taking your calls. They're going to try and prioritize your calls based on what you're telling them. Priority 1 is the highest type of a call we can put in. It means there's an immediate response and an imminent threat to life. Different violent crimes, in-progress crimes, domestic violence. Priority 2, that's an urgent response. There's situations happening that could escalate. This could be property crimes. It could be like non-violent crimes, such as a shoplifter who ran off with a candy bar. There's a chance to catch them still, and that's why it's priority 2. And then we have priority 3s, which are more investigations, right? My car was broken into, I don't know who did it, nobody's around, I have no evidence, my house was burglarized, I just came home and discovered it, nobody's inside, we were gone for the weekend on vacation, stuff like that. This is what we see. So if you can see this, we use a CAD, computer-aided dispatch, and this is the screen that they see. You can see that at the top is the address field, and that's everything that we need whenever we put in a call. We have to know where you're at, otherwise we can't move forward. From there, the type is in blue is the type code, and the priority is right next to it. A lot of our type codes autofill, but sometimes the dispatcher has to customize it depending on the situation. And then you can see the name fields are for you, the person who called. And then down below we have entities. You might not be able to see it because it's kind of small in this picture, but we can have people and vehicle entities. And then that's where we kind of go into the deeper details of the call. So this will be a dispatch console. This is another dispatch console. As you can see, we kind of have a couple of computer screens, don't we? Only like 6. But maybe 7. It depends on where you're sitting. We do utilize several computer screens for a variety of reasons. Our CAD machine has 3 computer screens, our phone machine has 2, and our radio dispatch screen has 2 as well. So depending on where you're sitting, you can have anywhere from 6 to 8 screens. Now, the City of Seattle has expanded online reporting. I don't know if any of you have called and had something happen to you and you were referred to online reporting. Anybody? No? So this is something that is expanding in our day and age. Previously, the only option that you had was an officer to call you back over the phone. But, of course, there's a limitation on how many officers are available anymore. Traditionally, we would have officers who were injured on light duty who would join in and take phone reports. And usually the City of Seattle, the SPD, would keep a small staff of telephone reporting officers known as the iTrue unit. But when the pandemic hit, the city realized that they need to offer more options to the citizens because there's too many low-level things that are happening that could easily be reported online. They could get to the detectives. So now, as it stands, we offer credit card fraud, graffiti type calls, harassing phone calls. Usually harassing phone calls would be somebody you don't know. Anybody get that like really overzealous telemarketer who wants to like curse you out because you don't want to give your bank account information to them? No? Just me? But you know, people that you don't really know. Identity theft is a big one. Lost property, like I lost my ID or my passport. Simple shoplifts where there's no violence, no threat, no weapon. We also offer car prowls, general thefts, theft of service, narcotics activity, and property destruction. And in the past 6 months or so, the Seattle website for the SPD has included burglaries that are of a low nature, no evidence, no suspect information. People can report burglaries online if they choose to. So the iTrue unit is the officers that work and take phone calls, and they do your report over the phone. They don't respond in person. They can take various types of reports, and they're not limited to the previous page, but essentially there has to be some key ingredients in order for them to take it. There can't be any likelihood of apprehension, there can't be any evidence left behind, and the incident is not racially, sexually, or politically motivated. Those elements would fall under bias and malicious harassment, which we always have to send an officer in person for. Also, no domestic violence. So when there's domestic connections to calls, because of that, there's the Domestic Violence Protection Act, and that's in the state of Washington. Officers would have to respond in person when there's a DV connection. So that could be like your cousin stole your bank card and ran up a bunch of bills, or you had an argument with your family member. We would have to go out to that. So the dispatcher, what's their role in all this? So they receive the call that the call taker you spoke to types up. The calls automatically get routed to a specific zone dispatcher based on the location. The entire city's computer-aided dispatch system is formatted to automatically go to the right person based on where you're at. We operate 4 primary zones in the city of Seattle. You guys are in the North Precinct, and so there's one dispatcher for you. It's a North dispatcher. We have North, South, East, and West. South is West Seattle and South Seattle. West would be downtown, Queen Anne and Magnolia. And East would be Capitol Hill, Madrona, Madison Park, Leschi, and a little bit onto the Rainier area, but not too far. They manage radio traffic and keep track of all the officers and resources, so we do talk to CSOs a lot. And that's an ever-evolving facet of what the dispatchers do. And it's actually pretty exciting because as the city imagines who is going to respond to what kind of calls, that's going to expand what our dispatchers do as well. They are documenters, and that's probably one of their biggest jobs, is that they make a public record and document all of the calls that anybody responds to. One of the most important jobs of a radio dispatcher is to make sure that they're documenting all the calls. So this is a dispatcher's console. As you can see, they have 7 screens. They have a phone in the upper left. The one that's the screen that's black, right next to it would be the map for the phone. And then they have another computer in the far left on the bottom that is kind of an internet computer, because sometimes if you don't know where you're at, we can use Google or other resources to try and help you to get to the location so we understand exactly where you are. We also have other resources available to us, databases that we can look up stuff. And then you see this 3 screens in the middle. That's the CAD screens. The middle one is where they would type up their calls. The one on the left is what we call the marquee or the status screen. It shows all of the holding calls that they have, and it also shows all of the calls that they've sent on the bottom part of it. And then the map is right next to it, and then that is their radio console. So like you've seen people with walkie-talkies, and so the officers on the street, even CSO, you guys got your portables on you? Okay, yeah, so she has her portable. And they use the portable radios, but it's actually a computer. And so it's pretty cool, it's slick, and it allows us to be able to talk to these folks through different technology to where we can reach them anytime we need to. If we had a little handheld thing like they did, oh boy, it would be a headache and a half, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, so as you can see the status monitor, at the top, the radio dispatcher sees that they have holding calls. The red one is the priority 1 calls that I was talking about. The white shaded one is a priority 2. So as you can see, the one at the top is a domestic assault. So domestic violence happened and somebody was physically assaulted. The second one is an argument. It's called a FIDO, but that's just the way the CAD system categorizes things. But that would be a verbal argument. And then the priority 3s are yellow. So you see one of them is a nuisance, and another one's an auto theft, and the third one is a disturbance. On the bottom, those are all the calls that they've sent on. So there's different officers that they're in charge of. The ones that are white that say A, they arrived on those calls. The ones that are yellow that say E, they're en route to them. The dispatchers keep an eye on all of those situations because when people arrive on a dangerous situation, they also want to check those guys' status to make sure that they're okay. So they'll typically say, you know, 2 David 82, your status, 3 in wall, and they'll say under control. We know they're okay. This is the CAD map. And so our CAD map has Google technology integrated in it. So if you told us you were somewhere, we could right click on the event right here. And then we could bring up Google Maps and see the street view to try and get an understanding of where you're at if we can't find you. So we do have various dispatch audio. Unfortunately, because of this system, the audio is in our shared server and this isn't a computer in the network. So I don't have that. But this is an entire PowerPoint that we have for the Citizens Academy that we run down at Park 95. But we do have different types of crimes that we define to the public to try and just help them understand the difference between a theft and a robbery. But I'm going to go down to the bottom of this just for save us some time. Because that's pretty much it. Oops. Now I will say this, that's kind of an overview of the 911 center, but we are hiring, so if you guys know anybody who's interested in being a 911 dispatcher, we do have pretty competitive pay, great benefits package, retirement, and time off. We don't want to take away from the CSOs because we know they're probably hiring too, but we're all hiring, and yeah. So that being said, that's pretty much it for my presentation. Did you guys have any questions? Done? Go ahead.
How long have you been doing it, and how did you get involved?
I've been doing it for about 14 years. Before I actually randomly found the advertisement in the Seattle Times, and before that I was an editor for a weekly newspaper, and I just thought it would be a cool career because it's kind of like journalism in a weird way with all of the questions that you asked. But yeah, I've been doing it 14 years. I started from the ground up here. I started as a call taker, became a radio dispatcher, then I promoted to dispatcher 3, and then I became a supervisor, and then in recent, this last year, I got promoted to operations manager.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I do have the microphone so people don't have to shout.
I can't reproduce it right now, but sometimes when I scroll up on my phone, push up on my phone, it'll get emergency down on the bottom. I've never pushed that because I don't know what that would do. But would that call 911?
Technically, yeah. So all of your phones are equipped with a function where if you're having an emergency, it'll go into your emergency screen. And that's kind of locking it in. It's your phone isn't open. And so what it'll do is if you did need to make a call, the only call that it'll let you make is 911. And that's kind of by design for most of these smartphones. But as long as you cancel out of it, you can hit cancel and you'll be fine. And that's actually a really good question because it leads to another part. Has anybody accidentally called 911 and didn't mean to?
Yes, it happens here because you dial 9 for an outside line and
Yeah.
then you dial 9 again for some reason, as part of the phone
Yeah,
call.
it happens.
And if you don't call any more than that, they'll come to your door.
Oh yeah. See, that's the thing. Every single call we get, we have to track it down. And if it's a landline, if we can't get a hold of you, then we're going to send the police. And it's treated as a priority 1 call. So the best advice I could ever give you if you accidentally call 911, don't hang up. Just stay on the line, let us answer, and say, I'm sorry, it was a misdial. And then we will be able to go away. But if not, you might get a knock at the door.
I would just say one more thing about that. I did that and they came to the door. We had a little window on our door, front door, and the officer talked to me and he said, could I step inside? He wanted to be sure I wasn't being held.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest things. Over the years, we've had several traumatic situations that have developed from 911 calls. There's a lot of different things that have happened across the nation where people call 911, they're in distress. It's one of the reasons why they created text to 911, because some people are in a position where they can't safely call 911. And also the hearing impaired community previously never had any true options other than a TTY machine. Has anybody ever heard of one of those? It's a pretty interesting device, to be honest with you. Probably like one person has that in the entire area. But now with text to 911, it's a huge resource for the hearing impaired community. They could text us and get immediate response, so, yeah. Anything else?
Any other questions from anyone else in the audience? So I did want to mention, we had this kind of training at the library, and one thing that they emphasized, because I was in Everett, we wrote a few incident reports, and they said, clothing changes, shoes don't. Let us know what shoes they're wearing. And I mean, in addition to everything else, but you got to notice the shoes. I thought that was so interesting.
It's definitely, the whole description is very important. Usually we try to go for the brunt and try to get the top first, just because sometimes people hang up. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people who don't want to stay on the phone with us, and they hang up on us. And so we know that time is limited when you call, so we're trying to ask the most important questions first. But definitely, when we're getting the description, we go from top all the way to bottom. So don't be thrown off if you do hear us ask, does he have on any kind of identifiable shoes? One time we caught a guy with cowboy boots just because he had on cowboy boots.
Careful, Don. Anyone else have any other questions?
Any feedback for the 911 center? I mean, we really appreciate you guys all showing up, so now would be the time. Any questions you have, concerns, anything you want to get out there, I'm here for you, so I'm at your disposal.
And this will be a credit course, so make sure you've signed in. And anyone who watches this later, hello viewers from the future, you'll get credit for it if you tell me you watched it. So thank you, Jacob, for being here and for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much.